Welcome to our explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're stepping right into the smoke-filled, vividly structured world of Tudor England. We aren't going to be talking about kings or wars or royal divorces. Instead, we're exploring the profound human experience of everyday eating. We're going to reconstruct the absolute reality of the 16th century through the very sustenance that kept its people alive, examining the landscapes, the sensory details, and those deep, underlying systems of medicine and law that dictated quite literally every single bite they took. To really understand these people, we have to anchor ourselves with a philosophy that completely dictated the Tudor understanding of the human body. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. This ancient concept, attributed to Hippocrates, well, it wasn't just some quaint saying stitched on a pillow. It was a matter of daily survival. To the Tudors, food was preventative healthcare. The dinner table was their very first line of defense against disease, because they firmly believed that everything they ingested had a direct chemical impact on their internal balance. And because of that, the 16th century diet painted an incredibly stark picture of socioeconomic division. An elite nobleman might pack in upwards of 4,000 calories a day, heavily laden with extremely expensive proteins and fine white manchet bread. But then, in total contrast, an average adult laboring man actually required 5,000 calories just to sustain his grueling work in the fields. And those calories, they were sourced almost entirely from coarse rye, barley, and root vegetables. In this world, food was the ultimate marker of exactly where you stood in society. Let's dive right into Section 1, Feasts of the Tudor Elite: Wealth, Power, and Extreme Consumption. The sheer scale and theatricality of elite consumption back then was just staggering. Get this, the royal court alone consumed over 14,000 large animals in a typical year. Serving spit-roasted meat was the ultimate flex of extreme wealth, mostly because it required massive amounts of expensive wood fuel and dedicated laborers to turn that spit all day long. And they were clever about the rules, too. Since religious laws forbade meat on Fridays, the wealthy used ingenious loopholes. They literally just classified grilled beaver tails and whale meat as fish. Problem solved. Feasts were highly theatrical productions. We're talking whole roasted peacocks carefully redressed in their iridescent blue feathers and incredibly intricate sugar sculptures serving as the ultimate symbols of absolute power. Which brings us to Section 2, the peasant's daily bowl, survival and the agricultural seasons. At the technological heart of the ordinary Tudor home hung the cast-iron cauldron. Just simmering away over a continuous wood fire, this single pot completely dictated the rhythm of daily sustenance. There was no vast kitchen staff here, obviously, just this one self-sustaining vessel where whatever was grown, foraged, or saved was transformed into vital, life-giving energy. So what went into the pot? Well, this plant-heavy, grain-reliant pottage was an incredibly efficient survival mechanism tied directly to the harvest. Notice the heavy reliance on below-ground root vegetables: carrots, turnips, onions. The elite completely shunned these as peasant food, but for the working class, they were a literal lifeline, because they could be easily stored in a cold cellar for months. The stew would be thickened with rough oats and barley, flavored with whatever foraged herbs they could find, stretching the absolute barest of resources into a meal. You know, looking at a bowl of this thick pottage, you can almost smell the earthiness of those root vegetables. A peasant would pair this with a massive, coarse loaf of rye or barley bread, and I mean massive. They'd often consume an entire loaf in a single meal just to mop up every last precious calorie they needed to work the land. It was a rugged, earthy existence where survival depended entirely on the turning of the seasons. Moving on to Section 3, Sumptuary Laws and Control, Policing the Plate by Parliamentary Decree. Now, you might be wondering, why did this massive gap between rich and poor stay so rigid? Well, the Tudor state utilized national legislation not just to dictate fashion, but to strictly police dietary habits. As a new, upwardly mobile middle class started accumulating wealth, the old established nobility felt threatened. So in response, the government used sumptuary laws to artificially maintain the social hierarchy. But it was also a form of economic protectionism. For example, when a severe cattle epidemic hit, the government stepped in with emergency measures to restrict luxurious feasting and forcibly conserve livestock. The state was literally reaching into the dining room to maintain order. It was literally a strict legal arithmetic for social status. A person's rank dictated exactly how many dishes could legally appear on their table. If you were a cardinal, congratulations, the law permitted you 9 dishes. Dukes and earls were capped at 7, and the gentry at 3. And the law even defined what made up a single dish. 1 swan, that equaled 1 dish. 12 small birds, that also equaled 1 dish. Breaking these laws carried heavy fines, meaning the dinner table was a highly regulated zone of social containment. Next up is Section 4, Humoral Theory and Medicine, Culinary Medicine and Internal Alchemy. Okay, let's talk about the ultimate authority on Tudor health, humoral theory. Back then, foods were absolutely not measured by carbohydrates or vitamins. They were measured by how their elemental qualities, hot, cold, dry, and moist, chemically altered a person's internal fluids. The belief was that if your 4 humors fell out of balance, physical illness or emotional distress would immediately follow. Therefore, what you ate, and crucially exactly how you prepared it, was an everyday act of internal alchemy. Because of this, the Tudor kitchen operated essentially as a medical laboratory. Cooks systematically used specific preparation methods to chemically correct the perceived dangers of raw ingredients. Take pork, for instance. It was considered a moist or phlegmatic meat, so it absolutely had to be roasted over an open fire to dry it out. Beef, on the other hand, was considered naturally dry and melancholic, so they boiled it in water to impart heat and moisture. Every single dish was a calculated medical prescription designed to correct the humors of the person eating it. Actually, scratch everything you know about a healthy modern diet. This deep-seated fear of cold, wet phlegm fundamentally explains the historical Tudor aversion to raw vegetables. To them, raw produce was genuinely terrifying. It was believed to corrupt the blood and unbalance the humors, leading directly to pestilential fevers and joint pain. This is why a fresh raw salad was incredibly rare. Instead, fruits and vegetables were heavily boiled, baked into pies, or preserved in sugar and vinegar just to neutralize their harmful properties. And finally, Section 5, Preserving the Harvest, the mechanics of survival before refrigeration. Before artificial cooling, food preservation was the absolute central technology of survival. The Tudor year was quite literally a race against spoilage. Cooks used osmotic dehydration through dry salting, they excluded oxygen by potting meats under rendered fat, and they utilized the natural antimicrobial properties of wood smoke to cure bacon and fish. These weren't just quaint kitchen chores. These sophisticated chemical and physical interventions were absolutely vital to stretch the brief, fragile abundance of the summer harvest across the long, dark, and highly vulnerable Tudor winter. As we wrap up this explainer in our immersion into the 16th century, I want to leave you with this thought. The Tudors ate to balance their humors, to comply with strict state laws, and quite simply, to survive the seasons. Today, our supermarkets are full year-round, and our medical understanding has completely transformed. Yet think about our modern dietary trends, our restrictions, and our high-end dining culture. How much of what we choose to eat right now is still, just like the Tudors, a powerful reflection of our social status, our anxieties, and the human condition. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll see you next time.